Okay, so this week's Token Drop podcast, we have a very special guest, Edwin de Boer, who is a expert in the supply chain world. We knew Edwin from Sajat and I from a previous company when he was here in the Valley. He's now since moved to Europe. And so we thought it would be interesting discussion today about supply chain. Any things that the panelists discuss today are their personal opinions, not necessarily those of their companies. So let's go ahead and get started. And, supply chain for me is one of the most crucial departments in a company. If you look at Apple, for example, Tim Cook's background was supply chain. And it's really important because it has both a revenue impact as well as cost impact, right? If you don't do your supply chain right and you fall short of products, then you are falling short of revenue. But on the other hand, if you have too many products or you if you have too much inventory or something like that, then there's a cost associated with that. So it seems like, AI in the supply chain space is really especially challenging for those reasons. It has such a significant impact. If you make a mistake and at some, big companies where they have huge revenues, that mistake could be significant, either in revenues or costs. So I just maybe could kick it off, Edwin, about, what your perspective on AI and supply chain? What are some of the challenges and opportunities, et cetera?
Hey, great, Sunil. So, welcome and thanks for having me. Great to be able to kind of participate and share my thoughts on this. I've spent a significant portion of my life in supply chain, both in high tech electronics as well as in the med tech healthcare kind of arena. And of course, supply chain has become a little bit of a board level discussion. Primarily because of some of the challenges that we faced, both with COVID in terms of supply constraints that occurred at that point in time, but also, of course, significant supply chain, disruptions. And I mean, everybody remembers the container ship that was stuck
Yeah,
in the Suez
yeah,
Canal.
sideways, yeah.
That triggered a lot of questions around, well, okay, are my goods on that boat? Are my goods stuck behind that boat? If my boat now needs to go around Cape
Give a good
down,
hope. Yeah.
does that mean that my goods are going to take way longer to get to their destination? And a lot of those questions triggered thoughts around, well, what exactly is the data visibility that we have in supply chain? And how well are we quickly able to figure out what the consequences are? So in my view, AI in the supply chain is critical in the ability for us to be able to look at data, understand the consequences of that data, gain insights, and be able to share those insights across the company in a variety of different ways. And I think that AI over time, and maybe I should start with that a little bit before, because I think AI is such a generic term up front.
Mhm.
I really believe that as we get closer to the true value of AI, we're probably going to get more specific with what we actually mean when we talk about AI. But in my view, what used to be digitization is now to a certain degree called AI. But I don't believe we're truly referencing the AI kind of value that we're talking about on this call. So AI, let's be frank, there's a variety of different definitions that you could talk about AI. All of them happen in the supply chain. All of them add value in the supply chain. But the most recent developments, when we talk about agentic AI, that's where I think the true value is going to come from over time. But this question around the Red Sea and disruptions, whether it be around scenario planning, around the trade impacts as a result of some of these duties and tariffs that have been applied globally, there is so much opportunity within the supply chain to leverage AI and get to a better understanding around where are my costs and what's the impact to my revenue.
That's awesome. And we've heard this is the year of supply chain AI 2026. And you referred to agentic AI, you referred to the volatility. That volatility hasn't gone away since COVID. In fact, If anything, we're seeing more volatility now. So that must be a significant challenge. So really, can you speak to, how you're thinking of applying AI, particularly agentic AI in addressing these challenges that you face, especially in a regulated industry like medtech, right? So it's another layer of complexity to deal with.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity is pretty broad, but I still believe we're at the early stages, and that's sometimes a little bit of a challenge when you talk about AI within supply chain or within a corporate environment. There's a lot of debate and discussions. Are we talking actual use cases? Is it widely adopted across corporations? Has it significantly changed the productivity of the organization? Are there baby steps that we're taking to improve our productivity, or are they game-changing kind of transformations that are truly making us think about, are we redesigning a supply chain, and are we reusing and reutilizing our resources in a different way? Maybe the easiest kind of example around agentic AI and around supply chain, there's always a procurement activity within the supply chain. So if you look at supply chain in a very simplistic form, you talk about plan, source, make, and deliver. You plan what is it that you want to go and sell. You source the components that you need to be able to actually put it together. You make those products that you're looking to go sell, and then you deliver those products to the destinations, whether it be B2B or B2C. So very simplistically put, a supply chain exists from a plan, source, make, and deliver kind of activity. And you can think about a couple of adjacent kind of steps beyond that, but let's focus on those four to start off with. In the plan area, we definitely have opportunities to optimize our supply chain through some of our ability to drive different scenarios, to look at optimizing our planning and forecasting. But that's less of an agentic AI kind of leverage. In the source area, when we're actually doing procurement, there's an interesting opportunity there on agentic AI, which is really around how do I actually drive a lower cost of my components? How do I manage that procurement for maybe a subset of my supply needs? And is it an opportunity to leverage one multiple agentic kind of AI solutions to actually negotiate and to agree on prices and volumes of components? And my belief actually is that for some of these components in whether it be a regulated environment like medtech or whether it be in a high-tech kind of electronics environment, a number of these components are truly going to be, yeah, a little bit of a agentic AI with an agentic AI at the supplier side communications, where we're going to be able to actually get to a better outcome from both sides, leveraging less time and effort from valuable resources who really should be focused on making decisions, looking at what's the optimal kind of solution between all of the different scenarios that we're facing, but taking it away from some of the transactional work that needs to be done within the supply chain. So
Mm.
from a make perspective, I see true opportunity here from an agentic AI perspective, but I also see that, I see that in the source area, but I also see that in other areas in make and deliver as well. But of course, beyond the agentic AI, there's a lot of other kind of opportunity to look at large language models, to look at the way in which we're actually discussing and determining best outcomes based on the inputs that we're providing. And of course, yeah, a lot of our people are using, yeah, logic like Copilot or ChatGPT to within a corporate kind of environment to be able to speed up some of the transactional activity that we're doing. So lots of opportunity, but specifically, I think agentic AI is going to make some of the transactional work that we do allow us to be able to engage in our ecosystem in a much more efficient way.
You know,
That's just
I'm sorry, Sajjad, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Sino.
Yeah, I used to work in the semiconductor world, and when I dealt with a lot with the supply chain guys there, I was in marketing, and we had to forecast and things like that. So I remember all my conversations with folks there. They were always very accurate and precise. If we asked them something about like how much inventory do we have on hand, it wouldn't be like, it's that didn't work. You need to be precise. And I was talking to this buddy of mine the other day. He's got a software company selling startup into supply chain, and I was talking to him about accuracy in supply chain with AI. He's got an AI company. So he's telling me, oh, if people run his software and they get an answer they are not sure about, they just run the question again. And I thought that was really not consistent with the way that I know supply chain folks to be. Because, if you get some answer that is uncertain and you're thinking it's a hallucination and you run it again, how do you know which one is the hallucination? And hallucination is a probabilistic thing. So maybe the first one is a hallucination, maybe the second one is a hallucination. So it seemed to me that is one of the most critical aspects of AI is the accuracy of answers because of that's the nature of supply chain.
No, definitely. And then I definitely agree that the trust level when leveraging AI solutions is going to be key in a corporate kind of environment. And the trust in the accuracy of the outcomes is going to be fundamentally important. And I think there's a lot of areas of, I don't know, people laugh about, well, hey, if I ask a question and I get a stupid answer, yeah, it's kind of you can't trust AI to that extent. And there's always examples that people have in their personal life
Yeah,
that highlight some of these things that really provide a really
yeah,
weird kind of solution. So I
yeah,
think definitely in a corporate environment,
yeah,
how do you leverage AI if you cannot trust the outcome of what you're asking? And I think that's a fundamental challenge that we're going to face. And the more we're able with solutions to be able to take away some of those hallucinations and be able to truly embed a level of trust in the responses, is probably the only way that we're actually going to get the adoption across the organization.
yeah.
Because a lot of yeah, people in an organization are going to revert back to the old way of working as
Right.
soon as they come to the conclusion, hey, this
Yeah,
doesn't make sense and this is not what
yeah,
I want. And I
yeah,
think yeah, solutions like yours, but ultimately in general, the AI organizations need to think through. Is there an evolution? Is there a percentage of accuracy? Is there some level of risk that can be provided in responses to some of the data? But yeah, if you're doing scenario modeling in a planning environment and you're looking at what's my worst case, what's my best case, and what should I do in terms of some of the inventory kind of decisions I need to make. For example, I mean, if we're looking at a global demand situation, we're driving global demand, we're putting in scenario planning. I've got 5 satellite warehouses, and I need to determine at the end of the manufacturing cycle how many of the volume that I just manufactured do I put in the main warehouse compared to how much do I put in some of the satellite warehouses. If I cannot trust the outcome of my scenario planning, I'm never going to make this
right.
an accurate discussion. And to me, I think it's trust you build up,
Yeah,
but at least acknowledging the fact that it might not be 100% accurate, but at least applying some level of ranges, some
yeah,
level of risk, some level of
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Eyes
accuracy
wide open.
assumptions behind it.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, I had a follow-up question on that. So trust is a two-way street, right? You know, you can you can trust the machine as long as you've given enough visibility to the machine as well. The
Yeah.
machine also expects the degree of visibility that you may have and may or might not have provided to the system. So, can you speak to levels of visibility? Like you got obviously your tier one suppliers. Now, some of those tier one suppliers are actually sourcing materials from some tier two suppliers, and they might be sourcing materials or raw materials from some tier three providers. So this a whole chain on the supply side. On the delivery side, also you said you deliver to warehouses, from warehouses to retail, wholesale outlets, and beyond. So it's a pretty deep supply chain, either which way you look. And then it also comes down to even just that might not be enough sometimes. You might want to know which truck is it on, or which train is it on, which ship is it on, and where is that ship with regards to this, and what are the weather and geopolitical events going on at the time of transit of that product there. So it is also this comes down to visibility too. So, and we've seen some companies trying to, build systems and technologies there. So, what's your view of that landscape, Edwin?
No, it's interesting because I think in terms of the capabilities that we're seeing as opportunities and as true value to an organization, I think there's definitely an element of the adoption increases significantly in the terms of when you see a quantification of the kind of the confidence or the truth level of the outcome. So your example of delivery, where we're looking at, for example, ocean containers that are crossing the sea on their way to a destination. There's great AI technology at the moment where you can, yeah, see the GPS locations of where your freight is sitting on a container ship somewhere on the Atlantic. And that AI logic can actually help you to determine and predict how long it's going to take to get to the destination. And in the past, our supply chain processes have always been focused around standard kind of lead times. Well, it takes 4 weeks to get from Rotterdam to New York, or it's going to take us 6 weeks to get from Singapore to somewhere in the UK. Those ETAs that were determined at the beginning of a transportation cycle were way off. There was really no confidence level in there. But at the point in time where you can actually build up your data, you can look at your historical information, you can then accurately determine and pinpoint through GPS coordinates where your container is on the ocean, and you can see that container ship moving from day to day. It actually helps you to increase the accuracy of the output, which is, hey, you're not going to make it for that ETA that you determined a couple of weeks ago when you left the port of origin. And I can, based on my historical data, which of course is a significant amount of data that you're collecting over years and years, you can actually pretty accurately highlight, hey, this is going to take another couple of weeks to get to the destination. And of course, we can then recalculate that ETA at destination. We can then use that new ETA to make a better and improved planning for the activity that's taking place in destination, whether it be the customs clearance process, whether it be delivery to the distribution warehouse, or if it's a project, which also happens in a lot of times. Am I going to be able to make it to that hospital with that piece of equipment that I've got on my boat? And is that hospital not going to be delayed because they're working on a very strict timeline, and I need to make sure that their product is going to get there on time? So those are examples where you've got a very kind of quantification of your AI solution, and it helps you to actually feel relatively comfortable and confident, which builds up the trust level. In the cases where there is more latitude in some of these decisions, it's going to be a little bit more, yeah, difficult to build that trust level and that confidence. Take, for example, another example which we see a lot, which is predictive maintenance in our factories. If you're able to collect the data from your manufacturing systems, if you know when your asset was put in there, when the last maintenance took place, what issues potentially happened during that maintenance, there's actually a very, yeah, significant ability for us to be able to predict when we need to do preventative maintenance again in advance of something going down in our manufacturing site. That also is quantifiable, but of course, your confidence level and your trust level is going to increase the more you actually see that the preventative maintenance is actually occurring at those times that you need
Right.
it. So I
Yeah,
think
you
that
mentioned.
it's a little bit of a question mark around a lot of AI solutions around, is it something that you can come to the table with and have confidence in
Yeah.
immediately? Or is it something that needs to build some level of rapport
Mm.
over?
You have to earn that trust. It's like a human, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got it's the
exactly.
same thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the,
sorry, Sajad.
yeah, it seems to suggest like, I mean, especially I think it's intriguing when you talked about scenario planning. And if you really efficiently use technology, Monte Carlo methods, simulation and modeling type techniques, there are zillions of scenarios you can actually play through and estimate risk reasonably accurately. And then with the visibility that you have in the supply chain, kind of see how that risk cascades all through the supply chain and what the end goal is. So, and there are many, many people trying to build this, but my concern really is it's nice to sit in a lab and build and design these things, but the real world is so different. Every company has its own proprietary supply chain, the way you manage vendors, the way you manage materials. And I think that takes a lot of last mile integration, customization, adaptation to making the systems work. And in the AI industry, they're talking about this forward deployed engineers. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, have you seen this? And
And also, one more thing I would like to ask Edwin here in this context, the same context, right? You're talking about simulation. So, how does digital twins, how are they used as the dynamic projection for the graph, right? Because supply chain itself looks like more like a graph problem, and knowledge graphs are involved. So the question is, how does the ERP data feeding the graph feeding a living twin on the network, and the twin feeding agentic simulation before execution. How do you see that going actually? I mean, do you see
Yeah.
the
I mean, honestly, that's going to be a challenge for a lot of companies, and to me, that's a little bit of where collectively we need to work to get to that level of kind of maturity. Because I can guarantee you the data quality in large corporations is always an issue. It's just amazing to in all the companies that I've lived in or worked in. There's always been the challenges to make sure that the data is uniform, is correctly modeled, and has the completeness and accuracy that you're looking for. And a lot of our systems require that capability or that data quality for us to be able to get the right kind of response, which actually I think opens up an additional opportunity for agentic AI, which is really around how do we help corporations to clean up and improve their data quality, and potentially also to be able to make sure that new data entries are actually entered in the right way that allows us to leverage agentic AI in a much more confident way in the future. So it's a two-way kind of street here. One, we want to make sure that we clean up what we've got, but secondly, we want to make sure that we're not injecting incorrect data into something that's already taking place. And I think everybody knows garbage in, garbage out, and I think that's where we have the opportunity here, because agentic AI, I think, in my view, is number one going to help us to clean up some of our kind of past bad performance. But secondly, I think it's also going to help us to be able to, drive outcomes in a way that hopefully is going to provide some level of confidence in terms of are we basing our results on kind of incorrect information data, or what's our confidence
Mhm.
level in the accuracy of the outcome based on the exactness of the inputs that we're putting through? And in my view, large corporations struggle with this continuously, whether it be mergers and acquisitions, which actually lead you to kind of try and pull together different business processes, different data models. How well are you in consistently applying the same logic to your data models? And secondly, of course, how structured did you set up your data models in advance? I don't know, take country of origin as an example. It's a data element that you have in all of your components. It's crucial for international trade. It's a data element that you normally don't set up when you create your product master, because it's dependent on where's my supplier and what's my supplier doing to be able to determine what the country of origin is. You could also have multiple suppliers for your same component, and that means you need a capability to have two country of origins or multiple country of origins for the same product master. How is that going to be embedded in your data model? And is your data model therefore also going to be accurate enough to be able to help you with the outcomes, and be able to clearly be able to tell you what the consequences are of different country of origins for the same product in your supply chain? And yeah, talking about duty and tariffs, and the way in which duty and tariffs are driven, it is critical to know, is my country of origin China, or is my
Mhm.
country of origin Europe? Is my country of origin Israel? It's really going to drive a different duty tariff, and therefore it's going to be really important to get that accurate. And how can we, with our AI capability, clean up data, but also make sure we inject the right data in the future?
We were talking. You were talking about the edge AI, or physical AI. We had a guest on a few weeks ago talking about just that. When we had the Cerebus announcement here in the Valley, everyone was just talking about that for just a few days, and it was really interesting. And so we got a friend of mine who's doing an edge AI chip company to come on and talk, and he introduced us to a new term I'd never heard of before, which is knowledge AI. He split it into physical AI and knowledge AI, and it was really interesting. And so, listening to the conversation, and a machine needs preventive maintenance. That's going to be often the physical AI that's there, and then there's the knowledge AI back in the headquarters looking at all this information. It seems like there's going to be a lot more of this interaction between the physical AI and the knowledge AI as we go forward. I don't know when
Yeah.
that'll be, but it just seems very obvious.
Well, I actually think that when you reference it in that way, the physical AI is probably easier to feel comfortable with
Hmm.
the outputs and the outcomes, through agentic AI. But the knowledge AI portion of it, that's the question around how trustworthy is that going to be for corporations to make the right decisions, and to rely on all of the assumptions that have been put into that. And once more, to me, that there's a necessity in the current kind of agentic AI layers to make sure that there's a level of transparency in terms of the assumptions that were used to come up with this knowledge AI response, so that people build more confidence and more trust in the outputs that are being driven, and then can rely on that for their future kind of solutions.
Yeah, in the existing environments, you have an entire data organization that's curating data, cleansing data, doing all the data engineering tasks, and keeping those pipelines running. And despite that, you have failures, you have exceptions, you have quality issues, but then at least you have somebody to talk to and they know what to do and then help resolve these issues. So now at machine speed, when you have agents doing these things at higher speed, which means your errors propagate at a much higher speed. So the intensity of focus on ensuring quality at each step in the pipeline becomes that much more critical, I think. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. I think the transparency is probably less on that level of agentic AI, and I think that's where, yeah, you need to have a true kind of trust and confidence in the way in which the results are being determined. And yeah, without that level of confidence and trust, people, yeah, might not get to the level of adoption that we're looking for.
Actually, the funny thing is an agent can act coherently if it can see coherently, right? And no single system of record gives it that view. That's what you've been saying, actually. It's very interesting. I mean that something with like a knowledge graph can give it that grounded verification, and provide that basis, right? I mean, so the question is, okay, so we have all this. You have to also simulate stuff, and you have to say what ifs there, right? I mean, actually. Now, how does governance and regulation and rules come into play in such a situation? Like, when you have agentic systems, I'm saying manual systems is okay. I mean, a human can come back and say, okay, this is not right. These are the, but when you're doing agentic systems, you have to really specify bounds, right? I mean, within which. So how do you do that? I mean,
Especially with regards to reporting, I'm sure there's a lot of reporting to be done, which means now you really have to have much more detailed reports on how something was produced and how at each step of the way you were in compliance with the regulation and such. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's two areas here. One is what I would call guardrails. I think in the case of scenario modeling, we're going to get into a situation where, yeah, you can drive optimization and Monte Carlo, and you look at kind of confidence levels, and then determine based on the output what's kind of the optimal solution. But I guess in today's environment, there is so much uncertainty that is very tough to be very specific around what kind of the variables are that I'm putting into my model. So you want your AI solution to run through thousands, maybe millions of scenarios and come up with what's kind of the opportunity, or what's the most likely here. But to be able to do that effectively, you do need to put in guardrails. You need to make sure that you're helping your AI model to say, well, within these constraints, you can actually do as many iterations as you want. And to me, that guardrail concept is something that's coming up more and more in terms of how do I make sure that I'm not trying to boil the ocean here, but I'm actually focusing on an outcome that's going to help me to make a better decision for the future. I think the area of regulations are very specific, but what we notice on the regulations is there is a lot of fluctuation, a lot of change. So in the case of duty tariffs, we started off with our IPA tariffs, and then a couple of months ago, that was deemed by the court of law as being, yeah, not the right way to actually charge duties and tariffs. We went to different kind of duty tariff construct. And those percentages have been fluctuating over the last 18 months for countries, dependent on kind of the state of the geopolitical kind of exchanges. So to me, a lot of the scenarios are also a question around, well, what do I put into my scenario in terms of the most likely outcome of all the discussions taking place? And I think guardrails will help putting in some level of boundaries. But there's a little bit of unpredictability here that I think everybody acknowledges, and it makes it very tough to say, well, what should I model? Is it 10%, 15%? Is it 145%? What's the right level of duty and tariffs? And I think that with some of our AI models that we've been able to put together here, we can get to kind of a likely outcome, but it's not going to be a single outcome. There's always going to be a spread or a range that we put in place. But the benefit that we're seeing is that we can actually rerun very quickly and be able to come up with a new revised kind of output, yeah, within a couple of hours after any changes occur.
So yeah, that brings
Oh, so
us. Yeah,
maybe real quick because we've run out of time.
sure. Yeah. Okay.
So,
No worries. Yeah,
okay. So we've run out. Thank you so much, Edwin. It's very informative and actually very educational. I learned a lot. I enjoyed this
Yeah.
conversation.
Great.
I hope our listeners will too. I'm sure they will. I'm going to end the recording, and if you could just hang out for just a second, we'll appreciate that. So
No problem.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks for having me.